Welcome to the Noob Doctor. Today I'm going to be explaining about apoptosis under 7 minutes. Yes, under 7 minutes, so keep looking at your clocks. Whenever there is an irreversible form of cellular injury, cell death ensues. So apoptosis is an energy dependent programmed cell death. So what does programmed mean in this sense? The cell actually knows that for the greater good of the body, it needs to unalive itself. And it's a pretty neat and clean process requiring energy in the form of ADP. So how does a cell turn from this to this? There are some key steps involved in the process of apoptosis. To start the process of cell death, the first step is degradation of the cytoskeleton. This was the organelle that was holding the shape of the cell, and now the cell is starting to shrink along with its cytoplasm. The second step is all the individual organelles like the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. Each and every organelle is also shrinking along with the cell, and it is broken into tiny fragments. The third step is the involvement of the nucleus. The nucleus also shrinks down. It actually condenses into a small dense blob of chromatin. And this chromatin is actually broken down into tiny fragments, just like the organelles, just like the cell. Step 4 is blebbing, which is the formation of protrusions of the cellular membrane. And in these protrusions, those tiny fragments of organelles and nuclear chromatin pocket themselves inside. The final step is when these blebs separate from the main cell body, and this in turn forms apoptotic bodies, and these are extracellular vesicles, or you could say sealed sacs. These sacs contain fragments of the dying cell, and these bodies are then easily phagocytosed by the surrounding cells. You can see throughout the whole process of apoptosis that there is no leakage or breakage from the cellular membrane. It is intact, thus leading to less inflammation. So what are the main mechanisms behind this whole process? There are 3 pathways: the intrinsic, extrinsic, and perforin granzyme B pathways. The key players in this mechanism are the caspases, which are the intracellular proteases. Proteases meaning that they degrade proteins. And 3 and 7 are the main intracellular executioners, you could say, or garbage disposal enzymes. Caspases in turn are controlled by a family of proteins called as PCL family of proteins, and these proteins are divided into pro-apoptotic, which includes PAX and BAC proteins that promote apoptosis, and anti-apoptotic, which include BCL2 and BCL-XL, which are against apoptosis. And I've made this simplified diagram to show all of these pathways. Intrinsic pathway involves signals coming internally within the cell, and these could be reactive oxygen species, hypoxemic or metabolic stress, toxic chemicals, or even loss of normal growth signals. Examples include getting rid of those webs between our fingers during normal fetal development, and thousands of intestinal crypt cells and skin cells that are dying daily due to their loss of growth signals. Any intrinsic stimulus starts and activates the BAC and BAX proteins. Then these in turn go to the mitochondria and increase their membrane permeability, meaning that the membrane becomes more porous and more leaky. 2 important proteins are released, which is the SMAC and cytochrome C. Cytochrome C usually sits inside the mitochondrial membrane. After its release, they form an apoptosome with the APA-F1 complex, and this activates the caspase 9. The caspase 9 protein in turn activates caspases 3 and 7, which start the degradation process. So the second pathway is extrinsic pathway, which involves signals coming from outside the cell. This mainly involves interaction of death ligands with their death receptors, which induce apoptosis. Examples include thymic medullary negative selection, which has the killing of bad or self-reactive lymphocytes during the selection process. And many chronic inflammatory disorders also have this type of interaction between a death ligand and death receptor, leading to apoptosis. If I take an example of death ligand and receptor interaction, these would be Fas ligand with Fas receptor and tumor necrosis alpha with its receptor. Now this ligand to receptor complex activates the FAD, which is a Fas associated death domain and adapter protein just connected to the death receptor. The FAD activates procaspases 8 and 10, converting them into caspases 8 and 10, which in turn activate caspases 3 and 7 and initiate apoptosis. So the last pathway is the perforin or granzyme B pathway, in which cytotoxic T cells or killer cells directly attack the cell and release enzymes. Usually this occurs in cases where the cells are infected by viruses or they have undergone malignant transformation. So this is the body's response to get rid of these bad cells. Granzymes are released into the cell. These either activate caspase 9, which in turn go and activate caspases 3 and 7, which are the executioners, or they form a SET complex, which acts as a nuclear scissor or nuclease. So this whole process actually causes destruction of the nucleus and also leads towards apoptosis. I hope you enjoyed my lecture about apoptosis, and I will try to make further lectures under 5 minutes so that it becomes easy and digestible for you. And tune in for next time. Bye bye.